In 1976, two young Californians decided to take a gamble on computer chips. In 4 years, they were multi-millionaires. What could they have done to earn such a high rate of return? Steve Jobs dropped out of college, studied Eastern religions, designed video games for Atari.
I received a letter from a 6-and-a-half-year-old boy a few months ago, which to me completely sums up what we've accomplished in the last few years. And it reads, "Dear Mr. Jobs, I was doing a crossword puzzle and a clue was, as American as Apple blank. I thought the answer was computer, but my mom said it was pie."
Steve Wozniak won a science fair prize at age 12, started designing computers in high school, and finally raised enough money to build one 6 years later.
Well, I took it down to the club, and I hauled my TV set, my Sears TV set down, and would set it up and demonstrate to everybody, look how small this is, look how few chips it is, and it's running BASIC on the screen, and I built it myself.
The founder of Atari, Nolan Bushnell, recalls a video game they created.
And I had one little project that everyone kept turning down. It was a project called Breakout, which was one of the games. And nobody wanted it. And finally I said, Steve, hey, do this for me, you know. And he's done. Wozniak wasn't on the payroll at that time, and Jobs was. And I think that he sort of farmed, you know, the two of them worked something out in the evening. And I think 2 weeks later, which in a project that traditionally took 3 or 4 months, boom, we had a prototype back.
In January 1976, Jobs, the promoter, began pestering Wozniak, the designer, to build some printed circuit or PC boards so other hobbyists could build their own computers.
We put in $1,000 total, and we'd have to sell 50 before we made money. We looked at each other, and I said, well, I don't think we're going to get our money back. And he said, no, maybe we're not going to get our money back, but at least for once in our lives, we'll have a company. He just wanted to have a company. And you can't turn, if you're like me, you know, and you're free, that's more of a reason for doing something. You don't have to justify it in some concrete, productive sense if you're going to make money. First chance in a lifetime. So we kind of started as just a little play dream.
For startup capital, Jobs sold his VW van and Wozniak his programmable calculator. In a few weeks, they had a prototype.
Well, we got our PC boards made, and I took this blank PC board down to Hewlett-Packard and showed it off to all my engineer friends, and everyone was gloating over it. I thought it was the most beautiful PC board in the world. And a couple days later, the phone rang there, right at work, and I picked it up, and Steve says, guess what? He's all excited. I said, what? He says, I just got a $50,000 order.
That first order came from the owners of the Byte Shop, one of Silicon Valley's first computer stores. And Jobs used it to get the electronic parts for the Apple I on credit. The garage at Steve Jobs' parents' house, where the first Apples were assembled, has entered the entrepreneurial folklore as the log cabin birthplace of the personal computer industry. It was here that Wozniak tested the Apple I and started working on future models. Jobs wrote advertising and managed the money.
The characterization that Steve Jobs was the marketeer, the promoter, it was absolutely true, and that Steve Wozniak was the technologist. Steve Jobs was the guy that really forced the company to happen, who solved the problems, who hired the people, who made sure that the company started to be pushed into a real organization. And of course, Mike Markkula helped a great deal as well.
Marketing expert Mike Markkula was so impressed with the computer's potential, he took some of the fortune he'd made while at Intel and provided expansion capital in return for a partnership. The threesome then began developing the Apple II for the West Coast Computer Fair in the spring of 1977.
We got the first units just the day before the show, and we sat down and we carved off all the little excess shavings that were hanging off of them, made them look presentable, and we put our boards in, and it was a complete working Apple II computer.
Journalist Michael Moritz wrote a history of Apple. He describes how Apple stole the show.
And they had colorful, large logos that were hoisted higher in the sky than anybody else's. They had the impression of a well-established booth, even though the booth was just draped with crepe paper, but it was, as they say in Silicon Valley, an order of magnitude more advanced than a card table.
Although there were only 3 finished computers at the fair, the company took orders for 300 in following weeks.
Mike Markkula's comment after the show was, he looked back and he said, it's going to happen. We're going to be a $500 million company.
That breakthrough led to full-scale production. The handful of employees moved into a new building in Cupertino and launched an advertising campaign. The design of the Apple II set it apart from its competitors. First, it was expandable. Owners could add circuit boards to run printers, speech boxes, and other devices. Second, the computer had more memory capacity, so it could run complicated financial programs like VisiCalc. And when Wozniak came up with a disk drive, it revolutionized the way information was entered and stored.
Apple developed a floppy disk that could work and that they could market before anybody else, and it put them ahead of the pack.
By September 1980, the Apple II dominated the personal computer market. It was being used at home for both fun and profit, in offices for word processing and financial calculations, and in schools to educate and entertain. 130,000 had been sold. The company had 1,000 employees working in plants from Ireland to Singapore. Annual sales hit $300 million. Apple's success in the sales room led to a growing interest in its stock as the company prepared to go public.
It's clear that for underwriters and investors, in the fall of 1980, the prospect of an Apple public offering was seen rather like the second coming. The people who had stakes in the company, the people who were underwriting it, the venture capitalists who had invested, were clearly going to see the 3 lemons in a row on the slot machine.
On December 12th, Apple stock was snapped up by the public, making it the largest initial offering since the Ford Motor Company went public. In addition to raising cash for the company, the offering rewarded early employees and investors handsomely. The big winners, however, were Apple's founding entrepreneurs, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, who had, in a relatively short time, become multi-millionaires because of their creation.
It was rather astounding and shocking. I knew that it was one of the finest products ever that sort of deserved to be such a huge winner. But it was something you could have never looked ahead and really believed in.